Hello, everyone. Welcome, one and all. This is the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, back, of course, with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
All right. So, Russell, you just wrote a piece, the title of which is called Apocalypse Now. The end is nigh, and I don't even know how to make orange juice from concentrate. And I thought it was a clever little piece. And yet, it's funny because I've been feeling kind of the same way. I think a lot of people have been feeling the same way, now that this pandemic has reached the 6-week point. There are a lot of people who are starting to just kind of wonder if things are ever going to recover, because it certainly seems to me like this is what an end time situation would look like.
It's very found footage, especially with all the Zoom and everything.
Zoom.
There's like J.J. Abrams does the apocalypse.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're much more of a sci-fi guy than I am. Wasn't Star Trek essentially this? Like people kind of hover through the universe in their own little pods and they only interact with each other on screens?
No, not really, no. No, Star Trek, I actually, at one point...
Well, Star Trek is more utopian than dystopian, right?
I was going to say, at one of my theaters, I tried to plan a dystopia versus utopia sci-fi festival, and I dropped the idea when I realized that Star Trek is really the only utopian sci-fi in existence. That almost all futuristic sci-fi visions are dystopian.
What about the Jetsons? The Jetsons is fun.
Well, come on, that doesn't count.
I'm a big
okay, technically the Jetsons is utopian. But I mean something with an enormous cultural impact. You really only have Star Trek. That's it. Yeah. So no, I mean Star Trek was very much this vision of humanity overcoming its past and learning to work together and, very, very idealistic vision.
Yeah, so you can see I never really got into Star Trek. But it definitely seems like we are turning a corner. Even some right-wing radio hosts are getting pessimistic. They're not able to do the whole rah things are going to reopen, and this is a conspiracy to keep us down. I mean, we'll talk about the protests in a little while because I definitely think that they're worth talking about. But talk about the article. First of all, why? What was it that made you want to do that one?
It's what I actually believe. And we spend a lot of time.
That's good. That's a good cat to let out of the bag.
It's
one of the few pieces where I actually mean what I say.
Well, I always mean it, but the subtext of why I've been fighting for the policies that I've been fighting for. Listen, I said from the beginning, when Sanders first came on the scene, and me and my wife at the time were going to Massachusetts and knocking on doors and fighting for this, 2 a.m. when we'd be talking about these things, I would say, you know what I honestly believe? I believe the system is too broken to be fixed. I believe we're too far along this road to turn back. I think the underlying systemic problems with the country are going to make it impossible to really reform it without systemic collapse. And she asked me, so why are you doing this? I said, because a lot of people are going to have to answer for what they were doing at this time. And I want to be able to say, hey, man, I tried. I did the right thing. I tried. I saw where things were going. I made an effort. It just wasn't really possible. And now, we're much further along that road than we were even then, and that's only 4 years ago. I think with the Monday night massacre that precipitated the end of Bernie Sanders' campaign, that prediction has come true. I said it was not possible. I fought for it anyway, but I knew it wasn't possible. The system is too corrupt. It can't be fixed. It has to be burned down. There's no other way that you're going to fix it. And no particular action is required to burn it down. It's self-immolating. You don't have to make an effort. It's eating itself. You've got a contest literally between a man with Alzheimer's and a guy who is really a satiric version of the kind of fascist that America would produce. This very, like, Vegas wrestling heel version of what a fascist would be like.
Yeah, no, it's very Fall of Rome kind of stuff. I mean, when you watch these debates, it's going to be very hard not to see the obvious truth, which is that, yes, I mean, this is what a country in decline looks like.
How can a great nation produce a contest like this and remain powerful?
And you know what?
It cannot.
Even if Bernie had won the nomination, as we tried our best to make happen, you know what? Looking at Bernie on stage with Trump also is an image of a country in decline in a certain sense, because you would have to wonder, watching that debate, why is this guy, meaning Bernie, the only guy that we could have put up here in this moment? You know, like Bernie is, I love Bernie. He's wonderful, but you know, he's not the ideal messenger for this platform, just because he is 78 and he had a heart attack, and he's you know, he lacks the kind of killer political instincts and some of the charisma that you would look for in a great leader, right? And this is not to try. Yeah, everybody knows I love Bernie. I'm just saying that, like, even that image would be like, man, so this guy was the only guy we could find. Isn't that, I mean, not, and again, I don't say that to trash him. I say that to trash everybody else. Like, why isn't there someone who looks and sounds more like Mayor Pete, who has the integrity and sort of moral courage and moral vision that Bernie Sanders has? That's a sign of a country in trouble as well.
Well, I have an answer to that. That's, I mean, if you want to extend the Rome comparison, Bernie Sanders is very much of that pre-Empire generation of senators still arguing for the Republic, even as they see the Republic dying around them. That's why only a guy that old would be talking like this, because he's from a time when our politics were more decent. So you don't really produce people like that anymore, and the few younger people that you're producing like that, they have no real power.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that was one of the sort of strategic flaws of the campaign that somebody had just pointed out to me in a private back and forth, and I'm assuming they're going to have a piece come out about this soon, but like, to frame the message as Bernie did as one of political revolution, one of transformative change, that may not have been necessary. In fact, it may have even been counterproductive in terms of appealing to, you know, older voters over 45. Like, maybe a better message was, look, this is not revolutionary. This is not transformative. We're not going into uncharted waters here. We're actually going back to a politics that used to more or less exist, right? Not all of the policies, obviously, like marijuana legalization, shit like that. But, like, you could, at one time in this country, essentially go to public college for free, right? And graduate with no debt.
He punched that more, you know, in 2016.
And make a living wage.
That was more his framing in 2016 about specifically public college. That was pretty much his line. This is not a crazy idea. Public colleges and universities used to be 100% tuition free. That was his pretty consistent framing on that in 2016. He didn't talk about it as much in this campaign.
That's true. But I think the rhetoric, we talked a little bit about this last time, like the rhetoric of revolution as opposed to a restoration of an easier time for working class people to have a dignified life, which did exist in this country at one point. It's not like it's never been the case in this country. That could have been something that could have been adjusted.
There's an argument to be made for that, but my feeling is after what we witnessed, the Democratic base is far too mindless and far too controlled by media narratives
Yeah, of course.
to accomplish anything. You
Yeah.
can't accomplish anything with people like that. It wouldn't matter what he did. Jesus Christ could have come down to endorse him. And if CNN and MSNBC gave him the treatment capped off by the Monday Night Massacre, they still would have voted for Joe Biden. It's they're useless, man. It's a useless it's broken. It's broken.
Yeah, no, Jesus would have been too far left, I think.
Yeah.
For, are people in Wisconsin, are they really going to go for Jesus? You mean to tell me Jesus and Bernie are going to win the election?
He's got the beard. He's got the long hair.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't work.
Yeah, no. Having 2 Jews on the ticket,
Yeah, how's that going to play?
Right, exactly. Plus, don't forget we would have had the toxic online army of Jesus bros.
Yeah.
That would have been a problem. So, one of the things, as long as we're on this, because you did touch upon the sort of culpability of every generation in this, and you focused specifically on the older generations in most of the writings and talks that we've had. But you also did mention that, the younger people are to blame, in a sense, for not coming out and voting in the numbers that they should. But, I want to be careful. We published Anis Shivani's piece, which we had the great honor to be able to publish that. And he basically did his whole case for, a Dem exit. And one of the points that he made, and one of the things I love about his writing, is that he doesn't really take time to explain his ideas. He just kind of lists them. And he spells them out in such a way that, like, the idea after the one you just read justifies that first one. And then the third idea just justifies the second one. It's a cool writing style. And so I'm going to flesh out one of these ideas for him. And I don't want to put words in his mouth because he didn't put it this way. But, he mentions all the ways in which this process is just, like, manipulated, even in ways that we don't really see. Like, for example, flooding the field with 20-something candidates was a way to manipulate the process, right? By saying, well, look at all these options that we have, and they're all sort of some spin-off of Bernie's 2016 message, some watered down version. Like, it's amazing when you look back at the field and you realize how many candidates were actually for Medicare for all at the beginning of the campaign.
Yeah.
Right? Not just Bernie and Warren, but Tulsi was for it. Yang was for it. Yang had 3 pillars of his campaign. It was UBI, marijuana legalization, and Medicare for all. That was one of his 3 main things that he was running on. And then even, like, the less usual suspects, Kamala Harris said she was for Medicare for all. Kirsten Gillibrand said she was for it. Even Pete Buttigieg kind of endorsed it as explicitly as a double-talking liar, like he could explicitly express anything. Like, he basically said, Medicare for all is the compromised version on how we would, restructure our system, right? He was basically saying that, like, we could go full socialized medicine, like an NHS type of system, and Medicare for all is the compromise. And he never came out and said he was for it, because he'll never come out and straightforwardly say anything. But even he was for it. And then one by one, they start backing off, and it starts becoming, right? So that's one way. Another way, I think, though, is this meme of low youth turnout. And this was in the piece that he wrote as well. Pardon me. He said, look, whether of course, young people didn't come out in the numbers we wanted them to, but it wasn't like they didn't show up at all. People run with this 13% number. Only 13% of young people showed up. No, it's not 13% of young people showed up. It's 13% of the people who showed up were 18 to 29-year-olds. There were several states in which they showed up in big numbers, and they were dwarfed by the older people who turned out in even bigger numbers. And he makes a good point that, like, beating up on young people for not turning out is part of the neoliberal design now as well, because it's a way for them to justify not catering to young people. It's a way for them to justify and explain to themselves and their audience and their followers that, like, look, the young people, they love this Bernie guy, and, they want Medicare for all, and they want a Green New Deal. But you know what? young people, they don't show up and vote. So, how can we craft our message around these policies that they want when we can't count on them to come vote for us? It's a way of letting themselves off the hook, and it's subtle, but I think he's on to something with that.
Well, you can turn that argument back on itself, even on its own premises, by showing that not a single Democrat has won the presidency in modern times without large youth voter turnout. So it looks like you do need those voters.
Right. Well, that just exposes that. I mean, that's a way of exposing that they don't really want to win.
Well, sure.
Right.
But that aside, look, I took blame, as you say, for every generation, for mine as well. So I stand by what I wrote there. I mean, another part of my motivation for getting more political is, as I've discussed in my writing and on this podcast many times, I was one of these fucking people for my entire life. And when I realized I had been wrong, I felt like I had something to make up for. I felt like I had a lot to make up for. I felt my own small responsibility as a citizen and a Democrat in a democracy for things having gotten this way, for not asking more questions about what Bill Clinton was doing. I wasn't a child. I was in my 20s. I was old enough to question, and I certainly had the education and the knowledge of politics, but I didn't ask those questions, and nobody in my generation really did. Very few. The Nader guys. The guys who voted for Nader, they were the only ones who were really asking that question. Most of us, we were the Hillary people, man. I was one of them. You voted for Nader, you asshole. Do you realize what you did? I was, man, I ran into a guy on the Gore-Bush election night. That poor son of a bitch, man. I ripped him a new asshole because he had a Nader button on.
So, what's funny about that? When I was in 8th grade when that election happens, and we were assigned as a homework thing to fill in the electoral map. And apparently that was the first time where they actually went blue with Democrat and red with Republican and stuck with it. I think
it was. Yeah.
It had kind of alternated back and forth, but that was the first time where blue meant blue and red meant red. And my 8th grade teacher assigned us to watch the returns come in and fill in the map. And he assigned us to go red for Democrat and blue for Republican, but everybody just like subconsciously was just copying what they saw on the TV, and so they did it the reverse way, and all the fucking and we didn't even have results that night because of Florida. Anyway, I was of the opinion, and I'm still of the opinion, that Gore was the right vote in that race, because even as an 8th grader, I looked at George Bush and I said, this is an absolute nightmare waiting to happen. Like, this is clearly a man with no brain. His father was president. This guy is going to be surrounded by wolves. Horrible shit is going to happen. Horrible shit is going to happen if this guy becomes president. And so I blurt out in the middle of the class, I say, how could you be so stupid as to vote for Ralph Nader in this election? And my 8th grade teacher said, well, I actually voted for Ralph Nader. That was a moment where I wanted to sink back in my chair. But he was actually that guy was probably the reason why I never registered as a Democrat, because he did make some sense. And when it came time to register to vote a few years later, I thought about a lot of the things that he would say, and I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna register no party.
See, he had an impact.
Yeah, even though he voted for Nader.
Well, but you know what? That's how I felt at the time, and you could definitely make an argument for that. But in light of what we have all learned, not all of us, but most of the people listening to this anyway, in light of what we have learned, Bush, look, I read the biography of Bush that guy wrote. I still have it, probably right back here, called Fortunate Son. And this guy was whacked by the media like you've never seen. You probably don't even know what I'm talking about. Most of your listeners don't.
I was too young. That was before my...
So this guy wrote a book called Fortunate Son. And
who's this guy, by the way?
Oh, God, I don't remember. I'm looking up at my bookshelf now. I definitely still have this book. Somewhere around. But anyway, he went through George Bush's life history, which is, as you would expect, it's a, ne'er-do-well fuck-up whose family money always bails him out, who always fails up in spite of fucking up every business he gets involved in and screwing up every job his family gets in. But the big headline of that book was that he uncovered that Bush got arrested for cocaine use. And his father was a congressman at the time, and they covered it up. They got him community service, and they got the records sealed. So this is a big headline. And then the Oppo research people do some investigating. And this is where I can't forgive myself for my ignorance back in those days, because I knew better. They uncovered that this guy had done time in prison. But, really it should be a heartwarming story of a guy who turned his life around, right? Like, this guy had been a convict. He went on to be a pretty successful journalist.
Right.
Once the Bush people talked to their people in the media, the spin was, well, what's the vetting process of this publisher? Why did they publish this book knowing that he had a conviction on his record, and that became the scandal? Never did they come up with an ounce of proof or even the accusation that his reporting was faulty, that his story about Bush was false. The publisher, under pressure, pulled it, and it wound up getting published by an independent press. That's the version that I have. I have the one that was published by the independent press. So I knew how the media operated even back then, but I was in that bubble of, well, it doesn't apply to Democrats.
Right.
Right? It only applies to Republicans. Only the Republicans are evil. So I knew what Bush was. I knew what we were getting into. But in light of what I know now, the Democrats, Gore, I mean, again, you wouldn't remember this. There was like a scandal about them using like a Buddhist temple for cover for fundraisers. Like,
oh, yeah, no, I've heard that stuff. I mean, I've learned that stuff, as just an adult looking back on stuff like that, yeah.
That would he have been better than Bush? Of course. Just like Biden would be better than Trump. But what standards are these? What standards are we talking about here? Gore would have continued Clinton's neoliberal economic policies. And in the end, you probably would have ended up with someone like Donald Trump anyway.
Yeah.
Because the economic inequality just would have continued to grow from those policies.
Well, it's different. I mean, that 2000 race, you had two, entrenched politicians there. And that's what I think, informed a lot of the Nader votes, was the sense that there's not a great difference between these two candidates, right? And they're both, their governing philosophies, absent, obviously what happens under the Bush years, right? But, we had no way of knowing that there was going to be a 9/11 or that anything like that was going to happen. That wasn't on anybody's radar. They were within the certain parameters that politics takes place, whereas Trump is outside that. And so I think subconsciously what you have here with like a Trump-Biden thing is, do we go back to the Clinton, Bush, Obama era with Biden, or do we sort of keep projecting that in the hopes that, to bring it back to what your piece was about, we burn the fucking thing down until we can build it again and create something better? I think that's the dilemma for a lot of people who are like sincerely going back and forth as to like which of these is the lesser evil. It's not as simple as which one is better. It's as simple as which road are we going to go down? Will we be able to turn back if Biden does get elected, right? Or if he picks, Michelle Obama as his running mate, she's a shoo-in for 2024. Then we got 8 years of her. It's like, before you know it, we're almost fucking dead, and we haven't changed shit. That's, I think, what people are worried about when it comes to that. When it comes to Bush, just one more thing I'll add. The major red flag that even as a 13 or 14-year-old was that you looked at this guy, and I could say this guy clearly has zero interest in being president. You know, I mean, you could just tell the guy just was not, he didn't have any, like, he didn't want, I could tell he didn't want to be president. He didn't know what he was saying. It was like, this was a guy who's like, you know, there's a guy whose dad gave him a hat and a glove and just pushed him into center field and said, all right, you're playing the outfield. And it's all right, okay, I guess I'll play as best I can. You know, so that was the thing that struck me about Bush.
No, Bush had a big ego. He had a big ego. And there was a lot of Oedipal shit going on there. And a lot of showing up Jeb. I mean, that's what I got from reading that biography, which obviously was written before the nightmare of the Bush presidency. But, you know, Jeb was always the golden boy.
Right, exactly.
And George was always the fuck up.
Right.
So I think there was some ego in that.
Maybe, but there wasn't presidential ambition, right? I mean, he didn't seek to define an era
only in the most dickish sense.
In American life. Right, exactly. In a very, like, petty sense. But, you know, he didn't, I mean, you know, like an Obama type, you know, they think, well, there's going to be an Obama era, and I'm going to, you know, reshape what it means to live in the U.S., you know, from here on out. And he's still obsessed with his legacy, as I'm sure a lot of presidents are. With Bush, I never got any sense of that.
Well, and that kind of confirms what you're talking about. Like he was very happy to leave the public eye when it was over.
Right.
Just paint his watercolors.
Yeah, and has made no attempt whatsoever to shape public life in any
or the Republican Party.
Right, or the Republican Party. Right.
Which usually the most recent president will try to keep their grubby mitts on it until there's a next president of their party.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, as I said in the article, I'm not even. I think the die is cast. Doing a lot of Rome here today, and I don't think it really fucking matters. To be honest with you, man, I think there are too many spinning plates in the air. One of them is going to hit the floor, and one already hit the floor with this pandemic.
Yeah,
another one hits the floor, and. You know, we're in a post-apocalyptic world. Like, we're halfway there now. It's not going to take much more. You're telling me that Joe Biden is going to make that better? I don't see that. But what I could see is the people around him will much more efficiently develop command and control structures for suppressing the popular uprising. But
well, let's talk about the popular uprising.
I don't see anything better.
Well,
I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about the one that would.
No, but I'm talking about these protests now, where people are out there, you know, protesting the lockdown orders. We had a good segue earlier, and I didn't take it because I wanted to say a few things, and I was afraid we would never have another segue. So you just made another one, so I figured I'll take this off ramp right now.
It's what I do.
Because the thing about these protests that strikes me, you know, and yes, I mean, it's we could be boring here if we want and point out that, yes, okay, you have the MAGA flags. Yes, you have the Gadsden flags out there. Yes, these people are, you know, I mean, see, it's different maybe for us because we're New Yorkers. We're like, if I leave the house and act like nothing's going on, I will get the virus and I will bring it back. Mm-hmm. And my wife will get it, who has asthma. Right. And even if she doesn't have severe complications, she has to isolate from our two babies who can't be without her for 2 weeks, you know? So like, I will get it if I just pretend it's not there. So will you because of where we live.
Yeah.
And it might be a little bit different out here, but still, I mean, I think, you know, it's one of the ironies is that while we are having labor strikes, while we're having people, finally sort of, realize their power as workers and, sort of walking off the job, sticking it to their bosses in ways that they never really thought to. We have these yahoos who are out there saying, we want to go back to work. Like, we don't want to sit home. We want to go back to work. It's just a very, very strange thing. And, there are a couple more things I could say about it. But what's your impression of these?
I I think it's a result of a long-term breakdown in trust in society's institutions. You have to have a basic core lack of trust in society's institutions amongst a certain segment of the population for the reaction to stay inside. There's a global pandemic to be, it's a conspiracy. Um, the tendency is to look at that and say, oh my God, those people are so stupid. And look, I'll grant you, they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer. But you know what? Most people aren't. But it takes a certain set of circumstances to make the people who aren't react in that particular way. Look, 1965, there's a global pandemic in America. The government tells everybody to stay home. You think you get this? Never in a million years. It's a break. It's because they have been given reason not to trust those institutions that they don't know what to believe. Hey, look, when we did the very first time we talked about the pandemic, when it was just starting, I expressed skepticism about it because I don't trust the media. I've seen them too many times because I know their business model is based around pumping up fear. Do you know how many hurricanes were gonna come and how many times a virus in another country was gonna become a pandemic that nothing happened? So my bias, until there was enough evidence that I would say, okay, well, this is true, was definitely to be skeptical that it was going to become what it became. Now, not being, dumb, once the evidence came in, I said, oh, they're not crying wolf for ad revenues this time. This is really the shit. But you got some people who still won't accept that. And you started to say about living in rural areas. It's probably a lot easier if you live in those places, man, where you're not really seeing this. You're not sick. Your neighbor's not sick. The guy at the grocery store is not sick. What the hell is this, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's ironic to me, though, when it comes to this whole idea that this is a way to take away our civil liberties, which is what, all the Gadsden flag wavers are saying, that this is how they're going to impose martial law, this is how they're going to take away our freedoms, right, by hyping up this pandemic and forcing everybody to stay in their houses and wear a mask when they leave. It's like, you are less controlled now than you are in your daily life, is what I would say. Like, if there's a conspiracy to control you, right, if they really want to control you, then, well, whatever her name is, Gretchen Whitmer, would let you out of your house in a heartbeat. She can't do that fast enough. She can't wait for you to get in your truck and go to work and come home and cook a meal and feed the kids and maybe go to Applebee's on Friday and maybe go to the football game on Sunday and repeat that every week until you drop dead. That's how you are controlled, right? When they force you to do something that you don't want to do, when they disrupt the system in this major a way, and they get you to actually think about the system in a critical way, that's not a way of controlling you. They're playing with fire when they do that, because that's how you end up on their steps, chanting and bringing the machine guns. It's like they can't wait to get you back to your normal fucking life. Oh, give me liberty or give me death. What liberty? Wait, what is it? Are you threatening them? Are you a threat to them by driving to work in the morning, coming home and going, eating some whatever, like honey buffalo glazed boneless wings at Fridays, once a week? Like, that's your freedom that you're exercising that they want to take away from you? Like, they want you back to normal. Normal is good. Normal is how they win. This is not how they win, by forcing you to do shit you don't want to do and inspiring all these people to think that there's a conspiracy against them. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's sort of the cruelty of it, right?
Well, I'll make 2 points here. One, it's kind of an article of faith among progressives. I mean, not an article of faith. It's well reasoned that Trump is not the disease; he's the symptom. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of a rotting culture. And the second point I would make, this is going to be a little controversial, kid. Listen, these people cause a lot of trouble, man. Well, actually, okay, I'm going to make 3 points. Okay, second point, how many of these fucking people are there, really? You know, you always got to remember when the media plays this up, what are you talking about? 100 people? 200 people?
As far as the people who actually show up on the steps,
millions of people? So, okay, this is not most people. It's a minority of people that makes great theater and is very good for front pages and cable news feeds.
It might also shape some decisions. It's not like, oh
my God, there are all these people.
I mean, Florida opened the beaches back up.
Well, that's true. That's true. And the third point I would make, and the controversial one, is, hey, look, they didn't militarize the police forces with surplus military hardware over the last 20 years for no fucking reason. Okay? Like, that, who's that for? Drug dealers? That's to fight drug dealers? That's to defend against a popular uprising should one happen. Why else would you give rural police forces tanks? What do they need tanks for? Why would you give it to them? So, for me, look, you would not want to live in the America that these people would fight for. But you know what? The government really makes a move towards a real kind of technocratic fascism. Those are the only people who are going to go out in the streets and fight it.
Yeah, no,
they're
like
the
my
only
aunts
ones.
would not fight it.
It won't be the Democrats,
right? Yeah, yeah, no. I mean that is true.
You know how I feel about those guys. I feel the way I feel about the Grateful Dead. I wasn't a fan, but I liked knowing they were out there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but this is also a product when you talk about Trumpism, or Trump being more of a symptom, than the actual virus itself, right? I mean, this is also like a form of internalized capitalism too. I mean, it really is. When you have people out there saying, we want to go to work to provide for our families, we don't want a government handout. Like, that's what they're saying. We don't want to sit home and go on unemployment and take a check. We want to go work and bring home our own money to take care of our families. If there is ever a time to be demanding government handouts, it's now. This is what a government exists for, is in a situation like this, to be able to provide for people until it is safe to go out and provide for your family. I mean, you're going to die. I mean, if you look at the Spanish flu chart, I mean, it's pretty wild how, it peaked and then it started going down. And then about a week or so after it started going down is when a lot of the regulations were lifted because they thought, okay, it's going down, we're past it. And then it shot up again to like double the original levels, And so this whole, just sort of like reflexive, sort of rugged individualist, instinct that these people have, it's going to get a lot of them fucking killed. And, this is a time now where, like, I did an episode with Alan a few episodes ago where I have a couple episodes planned where I want to do more on, like, the potential for building, like, labor power with all this going on, because there is a lot of labor action going on now. And to see this happening right beside that really brings into contrast, the fight that has to be won, right? I mean, like, stop, like, I need my hair cut. There are people out there saying they need their hair cut. I mean, you need your hair cut?
I suppose some of this goes back to, the frontier experience. I don't think it's an accident that you have that more in the states that had that experience than you have in states that didn't. But it's also, look, I mean, that's the whole right-wing thing. I have always wanted to write a thesis. Maybe I'll write an article for you. If you go back and you watch movies in the 70s, they predict the election of Reagan and the creation of Fox News. there is all of this messaging, even in movies that are not overt that you would think about in those
Right,
terms.
like I was gonna say, like
That
Network
that
would be
are
an obvious one, but that's not what you're talking about, I
no, I'm
suppose.
not talking about that.
Yeah.
Death Wish would be an obvious one that
See, I never
predicts
saw
this.
Death Wish.
You never saw Death
No,
Wish?
no, I never did.
You must. It's very much the old school white guy fighting back against a society fallen into chaos. It is. You watch it now, and you're like, you can see Fox News coming in the popularity of this movie. You could see this conservative, reactionary movement that's going to rise up. I believe you can tell the most about a nation by the fiction it produces. It tells you what its fantasy life is. It tells you what's coming next. But even in something as innocuous as Clint Eastwood did these movies about a bare knuckles boxer, Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can. And there's a scene in Any Which Way You Can where, the femme fatale, he's having an argument with her, and she says, I don't want a handout from you. He says, I'm not offering you a handout. A handout's what the government gives you. I'm offering you a hand up.
Right. Yeah.
And okay, like the fact that these were very popular movies and that kind of cultural signaling was
sure.
intelligible to its audience, it told you what was coming, that there was this counter reaction to 60s bohemianism and 70s kind of hedonism
Right.
about to come.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. There was one other thing that I wanted to touch about. Oh yeah, did you take my movie recommendation that I sent you? I posted.
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll make our movie picks now as we're wrapping up, and I have one this week. There's a great movie that I recommend you all watch, and I was glad that I found one, Russell, that you had not seen, because I thought, you seem like a guy who sees everything. But there's a fantastic movie. It's called The Conspiracy. And it's a tiny little film. It played, I guess, the festival circuit, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. My brother showed it to me when it was on Netflix. And it's one of these, like, movies. You know how, like, Netflix, like, 80% of what's, like, streamable on Netflix is, like, the old straight-to-video or straight-to-DVD section. When Blockbuster Video was a thing, you'd have, like, the new releases, and then you'd have all these other movies that you'd never heard of. And Netflix, has so many titles like that. If you just keep scrolling past all the like popular stuff that you either had a chance to see and didn't want to, or that you've already seen. And this is kind of one of those. It's like a found footage sort of faux documentary thriller about these documentary filmmakers who are doing a documentary on this, like, conspiracy theorist with, goes out with a bullhorn and screams, to the top of these corporate office buildings. And they're doing this film on him. And then one day he vanishes. And they try and track him down, and it takes them all these places, and it's really, really a cool, like, little thriller that really plays on what it means to be a conspiracy theorist. It plays with who conspiracy theorists are, and the way the third act unfolds is just so sinister and creepy and cool. It's really, really a fun one. It's called The Conspiracy, and that is streamable on a certain streaming service that I forget what the name of it is. It's a streaming service I had never heard of. But I recommend you all take a look at that. You don't even have to like subscribe to it. It's just streamable on there. Here, I'm getting it right now. Gotta pull it up. It's on Tubi TV, TUBI.com. It's called The Conspiracy. Check it out. What's your pick for the week, Russell?
All right, I'll give you two. All right, so because you made me think of this because you were talking about obscure stuff on Netflix that you would never think. Okay, there's a movie on Netflix, at least it used to be. I hope it still is. It's called The Signal. And, this is in keeping with the pandemic theme. And basically, a signal is coming out over the radio that anyone exposed to it instantly becomes psychotic. But what's kind of interesting about their take is it's not your usual kind of zombie rampage thing. They don't really realize they're psychotic. What's wrong with you? As they're cutting up their girlfriend. What? Why are you screaming? Like they don't realize anything's happened. That's a really good one. And okay, so listen, your listeners, you might get angry mail for this. All right, the most disturbing and perhaps the most intelligent horror movie I feel in the last 20 years is a French film called Martyrs. Check that one out if disturbing horror movies are your taste. Martyrs.
I have not heard of that one.
That's a rough one.
Okay.
It's interesting. You go and you watch these French versions of American genres, and it's essentially they take the core elements of the genre and they add intelligence to their interpretation of it. So it's kind of like that.
All right.
It's kind of like that for like an abduction genre movie. It's like if you took an abduction movie but made it profound.
All right. So Signal and Martyrs, those are your picks, and also The Conspiracy, that's mine. So make sure you watch those while you are quarantined. I think that's about all we've got. You can follow us on Facebook, like us on SoundCloud. Go to patreon.com/do dissidents if you'd like to support the show for as little as $0.10 a day. One thing I thought of bringing back, since we did one months ago, but it was right before we went into Facebook jail. So we did one, and then like none of our stuff was getting as much reach as I thought it would. But I'm thinking of bringing back a Q&A podcast thing because it was fun to do, and we've been getting a lot of people tuning into our live streams. So maybe we should start doing that like once a month. I don't know. What do you think, Russell? Should we do that? I'm just springing it on you.
Sure, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe we'll live stream them, or maybe we'll record them. But if you want to submit questions, just submit them in the comments to any of the articles that we publish or anything like that. Or you can email them to us, dodissidents@gmail.com. That was fun. That's a nice thing to do now that we're all sort of socially isolated. It's nice to build a sort of community that way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think this is a good time to start bringing that back. So you can submit questions, like I said, via email, on Facebook, Twitter, either DM. That's the other thing. Now that these articles are like getting a lot of reach, like your Dem Exit piece got a ton of reach, and the one that we just did that Mr. Shivani was kind enough to let us publish, it's been getting a lot of action on Twitter. But the thing is, this is the old man in me. I'm not good at Twitter at all. I don't understand it. Are you on that platform?
I will not go on Twitter for the same reason that I won't own an Xbox. It would be the end of my life. It would be the end of everything good.
I don't know that I believe, because it's so weird. Like, Facebook is all laid out very, very clear. It's easy to understand. There's somebody makes a post, and then somebody comments, and then somebody replies to that comment. It's all in a column. Very neat. Whereas like Twitter, things just pop up and it's like replying to at whatever the name is, but you can't see the thing they're replying to. You actually have to like dig back and start scrolling around to find it. So it's weird. Like now that people are responding in that form, I just get like alerts on my phone where like it'll just pop up that someone says "fuck off, tool." And that's it. No context at all. Just, I don't even know what they're responding to.
And you just summed it up. It is so clearly an emotional toilet bowl.
Yeah.
That I just don't want to swim in it.
But the thing is, I don't even know if they're telling me to fuck off, or if they're telling someone who replied to one of our articles to fuck off. Like, you don't even know, because there's no reference. It's just a blurb.
It seems like as bad as behavior can be on Facebook, Twitter just brings out the worst in people.
Maybe, yeah, I guess so. Because with Twitter, there's like no accountability at all. Like you just make up a completely, fake name.
That's why, right? There's no biographical details.
Right. There's no like clear profile page where like people can access you and like research you to see if you're like a really vicious scumbag or not. It's just like, it's just total free for all. But anyway. So, thank you guys very much for listening. Like I said, like us on Facebook, follow us, subscribe to the podcast, all that stuff. Check out Russell's new article, and thanks so much for your support. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.